Hey everybody, my name is Jen McKenzie. I'm past president of TAPHE, the Teachers Association of Physical and Health Educators here in Nova Scotia. And on behalf of my fellow presenters today, we'd like to welcome you to the conference and thank you for attending. We are TAPE. Today you're going to meet Steve Rainey, Susan Steele, Kathy Marshall Cormier, Laura Wilson, and Justin Oliver. We are pleased to bring you our presentation today. What we do is we help to provide PD sessions for physical and health education teachers and other teachers across the province. And we do that through webinars such as this one today, hot stoves around the province, and mostly through our October conference day. We share information, new, innovative ideas that are coming from our national body, PHE Canada, in hopes that we can better and keep improving our phys ed program here in Nova Scotia. Before we get started today, and my co-presenters and I show you all these awesome ideas, we just want you to think of considering, especially if you're not a phys ed specialist, to make that connection with the phys ed specialist in your school. You can share a lot of great ideas, get some cross-curricular learning going that'll really put into place the concepts and ideas that you want your students to learn. Because they'll be doing it two ways, with their bodies and their minds.
Okay, I'm going to be talking about using dry erase pocket sleeves for student feedback. So this is a dry erase pocket. In case you haven't seen one before, here they are on the screen. You can buy them from Amazon. $30 for a set of 30, and they come with markers. So they're really good to get feedback or information from students. So before I start, I'm going to do a little dance activity. I have 3 different activities that we're going to talk about. The first one, the dance one, and we're going to use CVE HPE. So that's Chromebook. And here it is here. I'm just going to show you like this. That's a Chromebook for health and phys ed. And that comes up to this. If you haven't tried this yet, it's really good to use. It has lots of GIFs, lots of projector ideas. So for this one, I would just go to dance. When I click on dance, this is what'll come up. And then I'm going to pick dance move. So here they are here. All right, so I will put this on a projector or a screen for my students to see. Then I will take you back to what I would get them to do. I would let them practice the different ones. There's many different ways they can roll the dice, or they can just practice whatever they want. But what I want from them is I want them to create a little routine. So here's the routine that I'm going to get them to create. Okay, so this is one of our outcomes, learners will implement fundamental movement skills and concepts within dance. That's grade 4. There's some guiding questions we can use. So I would print this off, slip it right in the sleeve, and the students would use the names of the dances to put them in. So they create their own routine. So that's one good way for the students to get it. Then after they're done, I take a picture, they have their name on it. I take a picture of it for later use, and then we can just erase it and good to go for the next class. So you're not wasting any paper. And it's always blank for the next class to come in. Next activity, which is very similar, and I'm going to go through these pretty quick, is K-2 gymnastics cards. Okay, so this is the same type of deal. This is a grade 5 outcome I use this time. And basically, there are all kinds of different things they can put in here, different skills and movements. I have something that comes with them. It's right here. Let's hope it comes up. Yeah. So I would post these somewhere, maybe in a sleeve, and the students would practice them, and then they would want to select 2 rolls and 3 bounces to create the routine. Then they put their name on it. Again, I take a picture of it. They have their routine set, and I can have that for later assessment just to see what they've created. Okay, so this is a great way to get feedback from our students. A last one I'm going to talk about, and I'm just doing these very quickly. You can, at the end of our presentation, there's going to be our email. If you want to send an email, I could probably even send those to you if you're interested in them. The next one is a scavenger hunt. This is just basically for collecting information. So we put this in the sleeve. The kids will go out. I actually don't get them to collect things. It does say collect, but this is easy to change. This is just an Excel spreadsheet. I put it in the thing. Kids go out. I usually put them in groups of 2 or 3. They go around, they try to find all of these different things. When they come back, since they're not collecting them, I usually ask them a question like, um, what in nature did you find that was a circle, or what was fuzzy that you found, just to kind of give them a check and balance there. So that's another good way that these are good to use. And we have a few other different things. So other possible uses, student questions. I've seen one on phys ed review. Phys ed review, yep. So they use questions such as, they show some pictures of some healthy foods, and then they're going to get you to circle the healthy foods. That's a good way to assess if the students know what is healthy and what's not. Self-assessments. How did I do with today's skill? So I use a 4-point system. It's kind of like clickers. I use wow, got it, almost, not yet. So you put that up there, and the student would be able to, it would have the criteria for each one of these, and the student will be able to write on the sheet and say which it is. Peer assessment, same thing, have peer observe and check off the skill criteria. Safety checklists, task cards, like if you have a set of tasks for what the students will do today, they can just follow through, check them off as they go. And again, you can just erase this afterwards. Student game creation, they can put a piece of blank paper inside, they can write on top of it so you can see, and they can create the rules and whatever, and then you would have it. And last one, station marker, just simple. I use stations a lot, so I can put these on the wall at eye level rather than just having them on the floor. We put them on the at eye level so students can see what their station is for that day. And that is try, erase, coaches.
Hi, everyone. Laura Wilson here as the South Shore rep for TAPE. I'm happy to share our Nature Mandala activity with you today. It's a mindfulness activity that students enjoyed throughout the pandemic in different ways. We've done it in person learning and also online at home learning. And it's an outdoor learning activity that's cross-curricular, and we used it too through our outdoor education elective. So students have had quite a few formats to try this out. Nature mandalas have to do with symmetry. So for elementary students, they have math outcomes that talk about patterns and objects matching or mirroring across either a plane or a fixed center mark. And then when we get up into the older grades, rotational or radial symmetry means circular matching of points across a fixed axis. So it's really cool to talk about with students because they can come up with both 3D and flat rotational symmetry examples, and some pictured below were suggestions that came out of our class. So it's kind of cool. We even had some older students talk about Fibonacci sequences, and in our gardens and outdoor areas, there's an abundance of opportunities to find live real world examples. So it can be a lot of fun. Even more important now than ever, as educators, we should be looking at how we can incorporate reconciliation in both acknowledgement and action into our practices. So talking to students and being able to have them share their cultural experience, as well as being able to acknowledge the land that we are lucky to live on here in Nova Scotia, that has been inhabited for over 12,000 years by the Mi'kmaq people, and talking about what it means to be an ancestral unceded territory and what it means to be a settler, acknowledging the past and present and future caretakers of this land. Students have a lot of questions and are curious about what has happened and why we are talking so much about residential schools. And by sharing the beauty of this peaceful culture, we are only going to strengthen being treaty people and learning from past mistakes and preventing these atrocities from ever happening again. So the students want to talk about it, and it's important that we as educators embrace the wrongness that has happened and being able to move forward by celebrating that beautiful, peaceful culture and showing how we can incorporate land-based learning into both outdoor learning and outdoor education. So nature mandalas. The word mandala is Sanskrit, which is an ancient language too. It's circle. And in Mi'kmaq, Gituwasit is how you say circle in Mi'kmaq. And also I've attached links in this presentation where you can go in and you can practice, and there are recordings of how to speak some Mi'kmaq words. Many cultures use circles, including our local First Nations, and circles are found in the medicine wheel as an example, which can connect to spirituality. So today with our students, what we will be doing is building patterns around what is a meaningful object. Okay, and below we just have some different beautiful pieces of artwork. When my students are going out to build their mandalas, it's important that we have conversations and discussions about each of these 3 cultural traditions because we want to honor them. So I'm just breaking it down in a basic way, but with my students, we have a lot of discussions about what gratitude, conservation, and consent looks like. So for gratitude, it's about giving thanks to have this existence of natural elements that the creator has given. So proper respect is demonstrated when using resources. What does that mean? Well, we have conversations about how in cultures, there could be, if you're doing a harvest in the Mi'kmaq community, sometimes they do tobacco offering as thanks. So for students, what does that look like? How do they show thanks? You know, could they say thank you? Or maybe carrying back things in a safe way, or even expressing feelings of gratitude in their own way. It's different for everyone. Also, conservation is really important. So we always tell students, you only take what you need, you should be efficient, and leaving no trace in the area. And I do a lesson on leave no trace principles. That's super duper important. Lastly is consent. And this one's a little tricky for students when we're talking about nature. So it's about respecting what's been made. They shouldn't be, you know, tearing off a branch that's very resistive to it. Can you feel that resistance? Does this is this living life form not wanting to go with you? Is there a way that we can prevent destruction, or is there a way that we can work around harvest that has already happened? And if you look below, there's some links for suggestions too. So once we have all of our ground rules established, then students are going to do the following things. They're going to go out and they're going to collect their materials. So it's important that students understand there's many, many ways to build their mandalas, and it may take a theme. So you're building it around a central object. And if you want to have a certain theme in place, then you might want to harvest in a certain location. So it's up to you. And you can change your ideas as it goes. So you're looking for shells, rocks, pressed flowers, sticks, acorns, leaves, pines, cones, ferns. There's a lot of forest debris that you may not have to actually harvest anything. So step 2, before you build, is there a way you could consider efficiently organizing your objects by size, color, shape? And again, we're talking about classification. So this could be explained very simply. Are they the same color, put things the same size together? Or if we're getting, you know, into the older grades, is there a way to separate things by classification, like what species of plant do we have here, different types of rock? And then step 3, we're choosing a center point that has meaning because it's a mindfulness activity. So how does this have meaning to you? Does it reflect a part of your life? And then you're going to place your objects in matching ways around the center point. So you're going to observe, reflect, edit, and revise. So these are all many, many grades of English language arts outcomes. Here are some examples of my students' mandalas. You can see there's a couple at the top with some beach themes, and then we have some forest themes too. Some of these were done in class and some were done in online learning. So it was really neat to see what students would incorporate when they were actually in their own environment outside of the school. They were a lot more diverse in what they passed in, which was really fun for us too. But yeah, just in closing, I think it was really important to note that all kinds of different learners really enjoyed this activity. You'd have the students that were rushing to make a competition out of it in person, being able to build the biggest or the coolest one, whereas some other students would kind of, you know, isolate themselves and really take some painstaking time to reflect and enjoy the peacefulness of gathering and then being able to assemble. And in online learning, it was it was definitely an activity that some students took on with their families. So being able to gather locally within their surroundings based on what restrictions would allow, and then also being able to, you know, see the different personalities within their own households, and being able to share their own creations. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Hi, my name is Kathy Marshall Cormier, and this is Susan Steele. We are sisters that teach together at Astral Drive Elementary, and I also teach at Bell Park.
Yeah, so this year's been unlike any other, and we were teaching outside, as was best practice in a COVID year. So we had been outside on the field and things were going great, but then our field started to get churned up and muddy. So we looked around our outdoor space and we had some woods. So we said, well, let's go into the woods. So when we first took the kids into the woods, we weren't sure what to do. They weren't sure what to do. So we said, okay, we need to step up our game. So we did some work, and we found this old resource from the Nova Scotia Sport and Recreation Commission. And basically it's what to do if you are lost in the woods. So we said, well, let's give it a try. It meets all kinds of our outcomes. And so we created a 4-part lesson, which we have a link to here, and we'll make sure that everyone has access to that. If you actually want to see the book, we've scanned it. So the book with all the activities is here, plus the summary basically of what we've done for the lessons. We have to say that surprisingly to us, this was one of our most successful lessons. It stretched over 5 lessons, and then it actually stretched out beyond that. It changed the way the kids acted in the woods. It changed the way we thought of the woods. It was just really kind of a game changer for us. So we're happy to share that with you. This could easily be done with a classroom teacher. It could be done as high up as any age, because really basically everybody should know what to do if they happen to find themselves lost in the woods. So it's a 4-part lesson because there's 4 steps, but really it is important that you take your first lesson and you set the stage. So our original plan was to teach a mini lesson at the beginning of our 30-minute phys ed class, where we would talk about what it is we wanted to talk about, practice if there was something to practice, and then give the kids some time to play. Often the free play time or the play time kind of disappeared, and the kids just wanted to continue on with the lesson. So it was really engaging. And like I said, it would work easily for a classroom teacher or for a phys ed teacher. If you're a classroom teacher who's doing it, you just want to check to make sure that your phys ed teacher hasn't already taught it or is planning to teach it later in the year. So the first lesson is about setting the stage. So a lot of kids, if you say, you need to know what to do if you get lost in the woods, they hear you need to know what to do when you get lost in the woods. So our first lesson is really about setting the stage, what you should do if you're going to be out in the woods. And we would talk about, it's very unlikely that you will be lost, kind of like a fire drill. But if it happens, we want to make sure that you know what to do so that you can be safe while you wait for them to find you. So that sort of set the stage, and that is really important so that it's not a scary thing to the kids. It's kind of a fun and important thing, and they understand that it's unlikely they'll be lost, but if they are, they'll know what to do.
So from here, we went into our 4 steps. So the first one, hug a tree, as simple as it states. Step 2, zip up and get warm. So we talk about their clothing and how to maintain body heat. Step 3 is find a home. We start looking at building shelters. And step 4 is get found, also called mess up your yard. But what do you need to do to get found? So pretty simple. The kids remember these steps and could actually tell them back to us throughout the year because they were that simple to remember.
So just for you, we have some highlights. So basically when we did the hug a tree lesson, it was pretty fun. We talked about what that means. Why do they say hug a tree? Really, it means stay put. And then we practiced. So everybody would find a tree and they would hug their tree, and that would be their home base. And you might sing to your tree. You might talk to your tree. You might be scared. Talking to your tree will help you feel better. So that was the highlight of that, was definitely just funny. It was funny for the kids to see us talking to a tree and hugging a tree, and then they went and they did it themselves. So definitely a lesson that they will remember.
Step 2, zip up, get warm. We talked about layers, how to tuck in, where to tuck in, the importance of hoods, and we talked about the heat escape lessening position, the help position, and why they would want to be in the help position when or if they ever ended up in a situation where they were lost, how to keep that heat in.
Yeah, and another highlight of this is that, you know, we taught this lesson maybe in October and all year long. So we would be outside in January, February, and they would come and they would be like, I'm not cold, I have layers, or I'm not cold, I've tucked in. And then in the spring, as it heated up, they would come and they would be like, I was hot, but I had layers on, so I was able to take the layers off. So it was really interesting. And we're talking little kids, but they were just so proud of themselves. And it really showed us how they had listened about body heat and staying warm and cooling off. They applied it the other way. And that was really neat for us because it showed us that they were engaged in the lesson that we had taught so long ago, and they were always thinking about it.
Step 3, find a home. So shelter building and buddy shelters. Now this became one of their favorite activities. Because of COVID, we couldn't let them all get in a shelter together. So we gave them plastic cones that we taped faces on. So they became the buddies, and they asked for the buddies all year long so that they could build shelters for these buddies. So all of the lessons that you need to build your own shelter, we would minimize it, and they would do a miniature shelter for their buddy.
So we didn't really build shelters, just like Kathy said, because of the COVID restrictions. In future years, we will definitely do this again, and we will get into human-sized shelters. It was really neat because I would go home sometimes at the end of the day, and then when I would come back, there would be like an adult size, and there'd be a family size shelter that the kids would work on and they would build. So they really, really got into the shelter building. And you might even look at this shelter and be like, I don't know if that's safe. It's actually very safe because we talked about safety. So we were always like, give the log a shake to make sure that it's not going to slide, make sure that this is safe. And the shelters, there were no accidents. So for all of the shelter building that happened, and there was a great deal of shelter building, nothing ever collapsed because the kids, even as young as primary, were very careful about making sure that it was secure. So that was pretty cool too. And that's sort of extended learning that the kids came up with on their own. And it was really neat because one class might do some building, and then another class would build on top of it, and then another class would build on top of it, and then the after school kids would build on top of that. So it was really cool.
So our final step was step 4, to get found. Just talking about making unnatural symbols around the area that you're lost in. So taking a leaf, putting it on the tree, arrows, piling rocks, things that just looked unnatural. So the kids really had fun with this because they got to be creative and come up with their own ways to let someone know that they were there.
Yeah, so again, this all year long, they would build things to help them get found. It was really creative. They thought well outside the box, which is what the best learning is, when the kids are engaged in thinking outside the box. So we hope that you enjoyed this lesson. And again, everyone will have access to the link and have fun.
The activity that I'd like to tell you about today is a cross-curricular game that you can add into your science curriculum, your phys ed curriculum, your health, mostly grade 4 science, the habitats curriculum. This game's called Oh Dear. And as you can see on the screen, it's pretty simple. You just need 2 lines. You could do it in a scattered formation as well, but mostly you just want a nice big area where it's safe for your kids to move. To start with, you need to get the idea in your lesson that deer, and we just choose deer because they're a nice cute animal. You could use any animal you want for your lesson, but I like deer. We get the concept that deer and most things need 3 things to survive. They need food, they need shelter, and they need some water. So you need a shelter, you need food at your belly, and you need water at your mouth. So those are our 3 signals, kind of like rock, paper, scissors. And it's basically a matching game. So you choose 3 or 4 deer, and they turn their backs to the rest of the habitat needs. And basically, you choose. So the deer is going to choose in their head and think, do they want shelter? Do they want water? Or do they want food? Then they're going to get that decision in their head, and it's really important. Tell them not to change. On the other side of the field, the food, shelter, and water are going to decide what they want to be. The teacher then, both groups are facing away from each other. The teacher then yells, "Oh!" and then everybody yells, "Deer!" and they turn and face each other. And the object of the game and the activity is for the deer to find someone that has the same symbol as them. Shelter looks for shelter. Water looks for water. Food looks for food with their hand on their belly. The deer run as quickly as they can safely and match up with that person. That means they survive because they have what they need. They bring them back, and for the purpose of this game, those food, shelter, and water become deer. As the game goes on, as with life in a habitat and a food web, there's less food, there's less shelter, there's less water. If a deer, after the decision-making process, can't find their match, they die. Then they go back over, or you can eliminate them. I don't like elimination games, and they can become part of the ecosystem again. You can take breaks during the game to sort of let the kids notice that, wow, there's a lot of deer now, and question them, what do you think that does to the habitat, to the environment, to the ecosystem? There's a neat twist in the game too. You could also add some man-made threats to the game. Some cars that might injure the deer. You could add hunters. Bit rough, but so you can take this game to many levels. I like it just because it makes the kids think about habitat. It's a great outdoor game. You know, outside is the best side. And there's lots of curriculum outcomes that we can meet no matter what the age level or grade. As you can see, we've got grade 4 science, we've got some grade 6 social studies, we've got lots of phys ed outcomes, and general math, matching, counting, number relations. Okay, so Oh Dear is a great game. Can get your students engaged for a brain break, can make them think about some science habitat unit, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoy Oh Dear.
Hi, everyone. This year, more so than any other, teachers like you and me have been taking our students outside. And we can have a lot of success with that, or our lessons may fail before we even begin teaching. And one reason that this may happen is because of clothing choices that our students make. Now, I know that we can do our best and tell them what's really important for them to be wearing based on the temperature outside, but depending on their age, a lot of them won't have a say in what they're wearing to school. Sometimes their parents or guardians will have a choice for them, and some of them, if they're a little bit older, may choose to change their clothes when they get to school based on what they were wearing when they left the house in the morning. But if we can give them a little bit of background, a little bit of reasoning why it's important to wear certain types of clothes depending on the weather, the more success we can have and the more enjoyment they'll have when they're outside with us in our classes. So as you can see here on my screen, I have a visual that I've been using in the past few years. Now, you can probably imagine this is a little bit elementary age, but it worked fairly well for me this year when it comes to my junior high outdoor education class. So where I taught last year, this was a very fair representation of how hot it would get in months like September or June, and how cold things got when it came to January and February. And we were usually somewhere in between, which I'm sure you were as well. And when I use this visual for students, you know, they're going to give me a little bit of flack and say, Mr. Oliver, we don't wear things like this. And for the most part, you're right, they probably don't wear some of those windbreakers that you might see in the images, but that just gets the conversation going with students on why it's important to wear certain types of clothing that we can take off easily, when our body temperature begins to rise. So, people call them shells as well. So the outcome that I used for my grade 6 class was two that I've posted here on the screen. The first one where I used this visual was where students had to assess their total minutes of moderate and vigorous activity during school compared to after school and on weekends. So we know as physical and health education teachers that we have the ability to get our students fairly active when they're with us during the day. And yes, they might not see us every day, but if they do, we can get them very active, whether we're in our gyms or outside. So when I would give my students notice that we were going outside, I'd ask them to check the weather. And most of them would have their phones. They would have a weather app on there where they could kind of see what the temperature was giving for the next day. However, they weren't always able to make great decisions when it came to what the weather was giving the next day and what they should be wearing. So I would provide a visual similar to this, and we could have some discussions the day before. And I might say, guys and girls, it's going to be very windy tomorrow when we're outside. So it's going to be around 12 degrees. So they would have a chance to look on the chart that I provided here and then make a little bit of decisions for themselves. Some are going to be hot all the time. I had 2 boys in particular who wore shorts every day of the year last year. And then I have students who are always going to be cold. I'm sure you'll have those types of students as well. And for the most part, we'll have students whose body temperature will fluctuate based on the activity that you're doing either inside or outside. So we were able to have some conversations based on choices of what we should or could be wearing, and always realize that it's easier to take some layers off rather than add layers when we're outside. So a lot of my students would not come to school with hats, especially when we're in the winter, or gloves or mittens. And I don't care how awesome your lesson is, students will begin to lose interest because they're going to get cold in temperatures in the winter time. So I would have some hats, some mitts, some gloves, some scarves on hand, but for the most part, students did not want to share those types of clothing for COVID reasons, and because they would say they would normally have a stinky smell and it wasn't their own. They weren't sure who was wearing it before. So that would give us the opportunity to have conversations on why it's important to be prepared. And students would then slowly begin to realize that, yeah, Mr. Oliver actually does know what he's talking about, that I was much more comfortable being outside for 40 minutes when I had my winter hat and something to cover my gloves, because he was right, it was windy. My second outcome that I looked at when it came to using this visual was that students would need to demonstrate an awareness that personal needs for physical activity may change for boys and girls as it develop physically and emotionally. Again, this was a very easy one to incorporate with this visual, because for some students, they were a lot more active than others, and their body temperature would rise when we were outside. And they were able to decide that wearing some cotton clothing wasn't always the best, because that would then get damp and then get a little bit heavy. And then if they were out there for an extended period of time, that would then turn their bodies cold. Other students would then need to decide that they wouldn't wear quite enough clothing. So someone to wear a sweater rather than a winter jacket. And when you're thinking of, hoodies that students are wearing, there's not a huge protective layer with those when it comes to certain temperatures of if it's snowing outside, if it's windy outside, and if it's raining, that precipitation, that wind is going to cut right through that material, where they need some sort of nylon shell on the outside of their sweater or jacket to help as a barrier to keep themselves warmer while we're outside, especially if they're not overly active to the best of their ability to get their body temperatures up. So when it comes to assessing this visual with these outcomes that I've mentioned, that's usually just a one-on-one conversation that I'm having with the students. And that would be something along the lines of, how are you feeling today? Are you staying warm, or are you feeling cold today? And based on their response, I could then ask follow-up questions. Okay, what would you do differently next time, knowing that how you're feeling today is probably not helping you be be the best learner that you could be today. And once we got a little bit more comfortable and did this a few times, they would then see what other students were wearing, and then we could have small group decisions about a little bit on reflecting on how the choices they've made with clothing, whether it's hot outside or cold outside, has impacted them in a positive way when it came to their learning for whatever lesson I was doing outside. The second visual I'd like to share with you today was one that was, I'm going to say, very timely this year. So as you can see, there are different types of wellness in this pie chart that I kind of have here, with different images and words associated with it. So the outcome I used this for was my grade 9 healthy living class, and the outcome was this. Students were to analyze their health needs in times of change and apply strategies to enhance their capacity to manage change in their lives. So, the elephant in the room that would always get this conversation was COVID. So back when we think to the spring of 2020, when we were all home and the province was locked down, we talked a little bit about how they made out with their health. And some would say, you know what, Mr. Oliver, I was a lot more physically active because my body was telling me that I needed to be. I was getting tired of sitting at home in front of a screen, and I needed to get outside and do something. Others would share about their emotional struggles, where they didn't get to see their friends. They were missing things like birthday parties, they were missing competitions, they were missing things like graduation, and how that had an effect on them. Others with the social aspect of not seeing family and friends in their community in person like they're normally used to. Financially was one that did not come up much, but we know that some families definitely struggled financially during the pandemic with people losing their jobs. And you just know who your students are and how that can affect them and their families and their overall health and well-being. We looked at their academics, and we know that many students did not succeed the same way they did it with in-class learning. And for some, it seemed like a little bit of a time off or a break from school, while others realized the importance of being in person with their teachers and their peers. And as you can see, we have the environmental and the spiritual aspects as well, which unfortunately we didn't get into a whole lot of conversation with my grade 9s this past year. But the second part of this outcome is the part I want to talk about. And we were a little bit preemptive this year. I think many of us had a feeling that there was going to be another shutdown at some point this year. So my question to the students was this: knowing what you experienced last year during the pandemic, what would you do differently? What strategies would you put in place to improve your overall health and well-being? If you were bored when you were home last time, what hobbies would you pick up and do this time? Is there any books that you wish you read, any shows you wish you watched that you didn't the first time around? And students would then have some strategies to put in place when it came to the second shutdown, which we did experience this year. And I have to give some of my students credit. They do listen to us much more than we think they do, and they were giving me some great responses when it came to strategies that they would put in place for themselves. And a lot of them talked about walking or getting outside, and with that they would also talk about listening to music while they were doing something physically active. So they were putting strategies in place to manage that change in their lives if it would come around again. And we know as adults, things are going to change in our lives. For our students, some of them might end up moving from one school to another. Some of them might have a divorce in the family, or they might lose a loved one, and they're going to experience change in their lives. If we can help them with strategies that will enhance their capacity to manage that change in their lives and improve their overall health and well-being during this change, I think we've done our job. So I encourage you to use one or both of these visuals that I've shared with you today. And please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. Thanks so much.